So if you're a Fujifilm shooter, there's a good chance you've owned, used, borrowed, stole, whatever, the 18-55 kit lens. This is the standard zoom that tends to come with most lenses, most cameras, sorry. If it's not the 16-80, it's the 18-55. Now, for a lot of people, this is actually the reason that a lot of people buy into the Fujifilm system, because how small this lens is. It is really, really small, and it's a very, very powerful lens. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the 18-55, which is a 2.8 to f4. As soon as you start zooming in, it goes from 2.8 there straight into 3.6 and then to f4. So if you're heavily invested in Fuji, you might be thinking, is it worth upgrading the 18-55 to this beast of a lens, the 16-55 2.8 red badge lens? So this is an absolute stonker of a lens. Obviously, as you can see, there's quite a massive difference in physical size. So a lot of the reason why people buy into the crop sensor cameras is to avoid these massive lenses. But if you are a professional photographer and you need a 2.8 zoom, which is straight through 2.8, you need the weather sealing, you need the reliable focus, you need the better resolution, that sort of thing, you might be thinking of upgrading to this absolutely phenomenal lens, 16-55 2.8, and it is a stunning lens. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the differences. We're going to be looking at a few images. We're going to be talking about video compromise as well, because this little beauty is an image stabilized lens. So we've got the image stabilization switch on the side. Now, coupled with a camera like the Fujifilm X-T4, this is actually a really, really powerful hybrid lens. I love it. I use it all the time, and although I sold them about 3 times, I always end up buying them back because they are such a helpful, handy little lens to have, and it is tiny. If you're a travel photographer or a YouTuber, they are such a powerful little lens as well. But yeah, we don't have, unbelievably, we don't have image stabilization on this beast of a lens. I mean, it's massive, isn't it? But it doesn't have image stabilization. Now, that might be a trade-off for you. It might not bother you. You might not be interested in that whatsoever. I know when I bought this lens, I didn't buy it for video as such. But what we're going to do is couple it with the Fujifilm X-T4 just to see how much of a compromise it is, if at all. Because sometimes if you've got an IBIS camera, a lot of non-iOS lenses actually work really, really well with with IBIS cameras. So we're going to do a quick comparison, only very quickly, just to see what the difference is between these two lenses for video. And then we're going to jump in, have a look at some photographs I've taken on both these lenses, and we can pixel peep till the cows come home. I'm also going to give you these files to download as well. So if you look in the description, you can download these files and you can pixel peep all you like and use any different software you want, just to see what sort of difference, what sort of sharpness, what sort of contrast difference you're getting from these two fantastic lenses. Okay, this is the 18-55 kit lens at 55mm f4 on the Fujifilm X-T4 with the iOS lens on, and it's in the standard IS mode with the X-T4. It's not on the super duper warping corners jobby. So this is the f4 autofocus constant, just to see how much better this lens is. Moving around the Yashica camera just to see how much it compares to the 16-55 lens, which I'm going to put on now. Okay, this is the 16-55 at 55mm f4 without the iOS, but obviously now we're just relying in the camera's IBIS to stabilise the footage. As I move around the Yashica, we should see hopefully a difference between non-iOS in the 16-55 red badge lens versus the 18-55, which previously had the iOS in the lens. So hopefully we'll see a stabilisation difference. Let's jump in and have a look at some images. Now, this might surprise you, because if you're looking to purchase the 16-55 as an upgrade image sharpness, this might come as a bit of a surprise to you. So we've got a few images I took recently for a customer, both taken on these two lenses. The settings and everything exactly the same on a really, really strong tripod with 2-second timer. So I try to keep everything exactly the same. There's no editing, there's no, if you look over on the right hand side, there's no sharpening, there's no noise reduction, there's no chromatic aberration or profiles added, and there's no editing whatsoever. So these are raw, straight out of camera. Okay, it's just a few photographs I've taken of Bechstein piano. So you've got that 2 sets of images. Okay, so if you look at the bottom of the photographs, it says here the file number 16-55 _ DSF, and then so we know which picture is taken on which lens. Okay, obviously we'd have that in the metadata, but just so we know when we're going through. And I'll put all, as I said, I'll put all these images in the description for you to download as well, so you can pixel peep and have a look and see what the difference is, because it might surprise you. I know it did me when I did this test. Okay, so let's have a look at the first set of images. Now, if I press C, I've got 18-55. I've pressed C. Now I've got the 18-55 on the left, the 16-55 on the right. Okay, so zoom in. Now I would look like I've focused on the ST part of the thing there. Now, no corrections on either of these, so I actually think they've both come out really, really well. There's no chromatic aberration, there's no nasty colours around. Even on the whites, there's no really chromatic aberration, which you might expect. I think we're both about 55 mil. So zoomed in at the bottom end of the lens as well. So I'm actually really surprised on how little difference there is. There's a bit of contrast difference. Don't understand why that is, because there's no filters used. I normally use a polarizer on this sort of shoot, but there's no polarizer used on these photographs because I didn't need it. But I'm actually really surprised, and in actual fact, it looks easier to read the Bechstein logo on the 18-55 on the left on the left-hand image than it does the right. So yeah, it's massively confused me. But if I go over now to these images, I actually think there's more of a difference here. I don't understand why. So we've got the 16-55 on the right, which has less contrast, which is an interesting one. Yeah, have a look, download them, give them a, you know, if you open, I mean, I'm in Lightroom now. Open them in Capture One if you're a Capture One user, just to see what you think. But I'm really surprised and how little difference there is in the actual sharpness at f11 with a 2-second timer on a Fujifilm X-T4, which I took them on. So I'm really ISO 400. I'm really surprised. Now, obviously, we could go into adding, you know, some editing details and stuff in there as well. But yeah, I'm really surprised. I think it's very, very interesting how little difference. If I was just buying that lens to upgrade optically from this one, whether or not there's actually enough of a difference. Now, I have noticed in the past when I've done landscape photography with this lens that it doesn't render detail in sort of like foliage and rocks and stuff as well. So that's one of the reasons I bought the 16-80 kit lens, I suppose it's a step up kit lens, and I didn't get on with the 16-80. I didn't think that the detail was anywhere for the size of it. I thought the 16-80 did not compare to this one. So, and also I had a few iOS issues with the 16-80 where it would fight the X-T4. It would fight the iOS would sort of, I couldn't move around like I can with this lens. I can actually move the camera around, and it's not like the lens is trying to fight the iOS it isn't trying to fight the IBIS in the body. So the 16-80 for me, I only had it a couple of months. I just didn't get on with it. So maybe there's a firmware for that. I don't know, but it didn't. When I bought the X-T4, I got it with the 16-80. So when I bought the 16-55, I'm buying it for a 2.8, and I'm buying it for the weather sealing because I needed the 2.8 and I needed the weather sealing. We'll have a look at some photographs of these in a minute, and I'll let you download them as well. But the bokeh and stuff difference on these two is the reason I bought this lens. The other reason is with a bigger lens, it's actually easier to use things like grads. If you're doing landscape photography, it's easier to slide a grad over because it's obviously a much, much bigger front element. So one of the things I did actually struggle with was the 18-55 using a grad filter. Although it's amazing for travel, it's amazing if you want a small lens. If you're taking your landscape seriously, I found it easier to put a grad over the lens. But let me be honest, I don't actually use grads that much anymore. So that might not be a factor. But yeah, that's very interesting. Let's have a look at a few other images. Now this one, again, as you see on the bottom there, is 18-55. This one was taken at f4, zoomed right in, getting the little Yashica camera as close to the lens as I could, just to give you an idea of what the bokeh is at f4. Now if I go over, or actually just press C, on the left we've got the 18-55 to f4, and on the right we've got the 16-55 at 2.8. The camera and everything in exactly the same position, just to give you an idea of the bokeh difference. So if you zoom in now and have a look how much better that bokeh is. That might not be a factor for you. If it's not a factor, then this might not be the lens for you, because I must admit, I think the f4 does a really, really good job at out of focus blur. I really do think, as lenses go, as compact lenses go, I think that's an extremely really good render for background blur at 55mm. I think it was. Oh no, it's 39. Oh no, 35mm it was when I did this, because I wanted to keep it exactly the same. So it's 35mm there, so 50mm full frame, just to give you. So yeah, I could have zoomed in more and got better bokeh. Okay, so if we look at these two images, we've now got both f4 lenses, both f4 photographs, sorry. So on the left-hand side, we've got the 18-55, and on the right-hand side, we've got the 16-55. And obviously you can see on the histogram there, on the exposure on the top right, both of these images are at f4. So that is the difference between the two as far as out of focus blur. Now it is marginally better on the 16-55, but again, is that a reason to upgrade? Not so sure. Now, a reason I put the Yashica in the top right-hand corner is because most lenses aren't at their sharpest in the corners. So that's the reason I put this there and focus there. So just to see what sort of difference is. Now, obviously we're f4 now, but again, it's extremely good. This is obviously the crucial difference here is that when I'm at f4 on this lens at 35mm, f4 there, I'm actually stopped down a stop. So this lens has now got an advantage, okay? It's nearly 3 times the price, and it's got an advantage of being stopped down. So I would expect a massive difference here. So this lens at 35mm is at its widest, pretty much. Yeah, I think it's at its widest there at f4. So this isn't stopped down at all. So I think this lens has done extremely well to even keep up with this lens, the 16-55. In this test. Now I say you can download these images and have a look at them yourself, but I really am impressed with how good this lens has done against the beast. If I'm honest with you, I'm really impressed. It was a really interesting comparison between these two. Now what I would say, the reason why I would, if I could only keep one of these two lenses, it would be the 16-55 2.8, because I can't imagine not having a 2.8 zoom on my back. So regardless, I mean, if you're a professional photographer, an event shooter, weddings, or if you just need reliable autofocus, the 2.8 is the way to go. It is more reliable focusing than the 18-55. There's no two ways about it. I've had a fair few photographs. The reason I've given these lenses back and sold them is because I've had so many missed focuses on the 18-55. Now it does seem better on the X-T4. I must admit, I haven't actually had, since I've bought this lens, I got this lens from Command & Cameras probably only about 3 months ago, third or fourth time I've bought this lens, and I've not actually had a missed focus on it. So it might be that the cameras have improved or whatever, but the autofocus on this, if I've got a bride walking down the aisle or if I'm doing a sports event, this lens doesn't tend to miss focus ever, and I've owned it for 7 years. Now, truth be known, a long time ago, well, a few years ago, I went from Fuji, bought into the Sony system, hated it, and then came back to Fuji. So this is the second time I've owned this lens. It was the first lens I bought back when I went back into the Fuji system. Did not enjoy the Sony experience, don't tell you that. So I couldn't wait to get this lens back, and I will never sell it again. So what I want to talk to you about now is the investment side of these lenses, who are these lenses for, and the investment side of it. Now, when I bought this again, I bought all my Fuji lenses twice. How many people can say they've done that? So this lens as an investment, I say pay 800 quid for it. I bought it new. I think there might have been a cashback deal on it. There normally is when I buy them. But £800, if I hadn't have sold over and went back, I could probably still sell this for 600 quid. It's mint. I've always got step-up rings. I've always got step-up rings on the front of the lenses to protect the lenses and to obviously get my polarizers on there. I've always got a polarizer on the lens, but it's still mint. They both are extremely well-made lenses. So they have. This is mint as well, actually. I know it was second-hand when I bought it, but it's. You know, I don't tend to look after this lens, if I'm honest, because it's obviously my YouTube lens. It gets a bit of a hammering. But yeah, both of them haven't got a scratch on them. They are extremely good lenses. Now, I could stick this on eBay if I had to, if I was going to swap over again, perhaps a GFX or something, and still get 600 quid for it. So I've had this lens potentially 6 or 7 years, professional shooting, and then sold it with a £200 loss over 7 years. That's not a loss. That's that's a free lens as far as I'm concerned. So this lens just doesn't cost. It's like putting money in the bank. If you're using it on a weekly or daily basis professionally, this is an investment, and it's just incredible investment of that, because other than having the iOS on it, I can't fault the lens. I do wish it was sharper wide open, but I can say that about a fair few of Fuji lenses. I wish it was sharper wide open, but the 24-105 Canon lens that I used to have years ago was definitely not sharp at f4. Zoom in at f4, that lens was not usable professionally. So, and I knew that, even though it had iOS and it was the red ring lens, or whatever you call it, it wasn't sharp. So this I would definitely say is better than that Canon lens was. But as with the 5140, I find it a lot sharper, just stopped down a little bit. So it's a massive investment. It's a lens that I would definitely, it's probably like my Desert Island lens, if I'm honest, because you can pretty much do anything with it, especially with the IBIS and the XT4. This lens, I love the fact that it's 2.8 wide open, but I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't. You know, you're not going to get 2.8 lens this small, are you? It's just the focus reliability of this lens. There's not really, and the fact that I haven't got aperture markings, which you can't do because obviously it's a variable aperture lens. So there's not really anything to dislike. If it was weather sealed, it would be absolutely stunning. If Fuji brought out a weather sealed lens like this size, I think it'd sell like hotcakes. I really do, especially because the XT3, the XT4, and so many of the Fuji lenses now have got superb weather sealing. This lens as a travel lens really does need to be weather sealed. So maybe that's something that Fuji come out with in the future. Last thing I want to mention is that this lens might be more future-proof if you're thinking about buying into the new Fuji camera system, which has got the, I suppose the rumours have told me, this is rumours, so might be wrong on this, higher res sensor, and possibly no longer an X-trans sensor. So if you're thinking about buying into the Fujifilm system for long term and then looking to upgrade into a potentially a higher res sensor, this lens is probably going to be, in fact I'd put money on it, it's probably going to render higher resolution better than this lens. So that's something to consider. And bearing in mind as well, you're not losing money if you buy this lens. They sell straight away secondhand, and I don't think I'd ever sell it, but I know it's pretty much like having money in the bank. It really is. They are a massive investment, and I love it. I think it's fantastic. So there's quite a difference. Perhaps I should have had them like this to start with. But there's quite a difference in size. A lot of people say that they wouldn't touch this lens because of the weight of it. I'll put the size and weight and everything up on the screen for you, but I don't think. I think as a pro photographer, if you're shooting all day and you've got even without the grip on the body, but if you're shooting all day, you want a lens that you can hold on to. You really do. You want to feel like you've got something you can hold on to, and you've got nice sort of areas to zoom. You've got your focal, nice area for focusing. It's just a nice ergonomic lens, and not in the slightest bit do I think it's too heavy, or too big, and I couldn't care less about the size. If it's going to get the job done, if I'm there as a professional, I don't want to bring a camera system just because it's smaller. It's just not going to happen. And if I'm shooting primes, that's for a different reason, but if I need a zoom lens, this is absolutely the one I'll reach for. It is stunning and it doesn't let me down. The biggest advantage for me, again, or just to recap, is the weather sealing, the weather sealing, the autofocus reliability, especially in video. If you're using, this is something I've not mentioned, if you're using an ND grad, or sorry, a variable ND for video with this lens, it can miss. If you're in autofocus continuous, it can miss. So the biggest negative I'll say with that is it can miss. If you're using a ND in the same settings with this one, you've got far more chance of it being reliable. It just seems to hold on to your face and your eye. And even with a polarizer, it just holds on focus a lot better with this lens. Yeah, massive upgrade as far as focusing goes, and just that having that reliability for me is worth the extra money. So yeah, definitely an upgrade for me. But I wouldn't be without either. I think I'll definitely now keep both, and the only reason I'd sell this again now is if Fujifilm bring out a WR version. Because truth be known, I left this in the car this morning, brought it in, and it steamed up. Into the house, it steamed up. So yeah, that's things like that. Anyway, I'll leave it there. This only wanted to be a short video. But yeah, it hasn't ended up being that way, has it? Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.